The woman I was supposed to marry looked me in the eyes and told me she had chosen another man, not whispered it, not cried while saying it. She said it calmly, almost as if she were canceling a dinner reservation. We were sitting at the same restaurant where I had proposed to her 8 months earlier. The same corner table, the same soft music, even the same waiter who had smiled when she said yes. But that night, she wasn't wearing the engagement ring. I stared at her empty finger. Then I looked at the man sitting beside her. His name was Ryan. He was confident, wealthy, perfectly dressed, and apparently everything I wasn't. My fiancée, Emily, took a slow breath. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said, "but I've realized Ryan can give me the life I deserve." For a few seconds I couldn't hear anything. The restaurant seemed to disappear around me. All I could think about was the apartment we had chosen together, the wedding venue we had booked, the future we had planned. I had spent 3 years building that future, and she had replaced it in a few months. I looked at Ryan. He gave me a small, almost apologetic smile. That smile hurt more than Emily's words, because he knew exactly what he was taking from me. Emily reached across the table. "I never wanted to hurt you." I slowly pulled my hand away. "No," I said quietly. Her expression changed. "Daniel." I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't insult Ryan. I didn't beg her to stay. Instead, I looked directly at Emily and said something that made her completely silent. "You should probably learn the truth before you make this decision." She frowned. "What truth?" I picked up my coat from the chair. "The truth about who you were actually leaving." Then I walked away. That night, Emily believed she had chosen the better man. She had no idea that I had spent the last 5 years hiding the one thing that could change everything. And I wasn't going to chase her anymore. I was going to let her discover the truth on her own. To understand why Emily left me, you have to understand the man she thought I was. She thought I was ordinary. And honestly, I never gave her much reason to think otherwise. I drove an old black sedan that had more scratches than shine. I rented a modest apartment on the edge of the city. I wore the same few suits to work, and when Emily wanted expensive dinners, I usually suggested places where we could actually talk instead of places where a single meal cost half my monthly rent. She used to find that charming. At least, that's what she told me. When we first met, Emily wasn't impressed by money. She was impressed by the way I listened. She was having a terrible day at work when we met at a small coffee shop. She spilled her drink, dropped her phone, and nearly walked into the wrong table. I laughed. She laughed too. That was the beginning. For the next 3 years, I did everything I could to make her happy. When she wanted to go back to school, I encouraged her. When she dreamed about opening her own design studio, I helped her build the business plan. When she was scared she wasn't talented enough, I reminded her that she was. I never asked her to become someone else. I loved the woman she already was, and I thought she loved me the same way. But there was something Emily didn't know about me, something I had never told her. 5 years before I met her, my father died and left me a small investment company. It wasn't a huge empire. At least, not at first. My father had built it slowly over decades. He taught me that real wealth wasn't about showing people what you owned. It was about building something that could survive without you. So I took his advice. I worked quietly. I reinvested profits. I bought small companies that other people ignored. I never changed my lifestyle. I didn't want people treating me differently because of money. And when I met Emily, I decided to keep it that way. I wanted to know whether someone could love Daniel the man, not Daniel the bank account. For a long time, I believed Emily had passed that test. Then Ryan appeared. Ryan wore expensive watches. He drove cars that cost more than my apartment building. He booked luxury vacations and talked about investments like money was simply another language he had been born speaking. At first, Emily told me I had nothing to worry about. "He's just a friend," she said. I believed her, until she started changing. Our simple dinners weren't good enough anymore. My car became embarrassing. My apartment suddenly felt too small. And one night, while we were discussing our wedding, Emily looked at me and asked, "Daniel, are you ever going to become more ambitious?" I stared at her. "I thought you loved the life we were building." She looked away. "I used to." That sentence stayed with me, because that's when I finally understood. Emily wasn't falling in love with Ryan. She was falling in love with the life she believed Ryan could give her, and she had no idea that the man she was preparing to leave was already living the future she wanted. Ryan didn't enter Emily's life like a stranger. He entered it like an upgrade. That was the best way I could describe him. He was everything I wasn't pretending to be. Confident, expensive, always surrounded by people who knew his name. He drove a silver sports car, wore designer suits, and somehow made every ordinary conversation sound like a business opportunity. At first, Emily insisted there was nothing between them. "Ryan is just helping me with my studio," she said. I nodded. I trusted her. That was my mistake. Soon, Ryan started appearing everywhere. He invited Emily to business dinners. He sent her flowers. He gave her a watch for her birthday that probably cost more than everything I had spent on our engagement. When I asked Emily about it, she shrugged. "It's just a gift." I looked at her. "From a man who knows you're engaged." She became irritated. "Why are you making this such a big deal?" I didn't answer, because I already knew the answer. The problem wasn't Ryan. The problem was that Emily liked the attention, and slowly, she started comparing us. Ryan understands ambition. Ryan knows how to make money. Ryan doesn't think small. Every sentence felt like another brick being placed between us. One evening, I came home early and found Emily sitting on our balcony, laughing on the phone. I knew that laugh. It was the laugh she used to have with me. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call. "Who was that?" She hesitated. "Ryan." I nodded. "Of course," she looked annoyed. "You need to trust me." She stared at me. "What does that mean?" "It means I trusted you before I had a reason not to." She didn't respond. A week later, she asked me to meet her at the same restaurant where I had proposed. I thought she wanted to fix things. Instead, she arrived with Ryan. That was when I knew. Emily sat across from me and slowly removed her engagement ring. "I've made my decision," she said. I looked at the ring on the table, then at Ryan, then back at Emily. "Do you love him?" She took a long breath. "I don't know. That answer somehow hurt more than yes. But I know he can give me a better future." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because she had no idea how wrong she was. Ryan placed his hand gently on hers. Emily didn't pull away. I stood there silently, realizing that the woman I had planned to marry had already chosen another man. But what neither of them knew was that Ryan had just taken Emily away from the wrong version of me. And soon, they were both going to meet the real one. I wish I could say I walked away from that restaurant without feeling anything. I didn't the moment I stepped outside. The cold night air hit my face, but it wasn't enough to numb what was happening inside me. 3 years. 3 years of loving Emily. 3 years of believing we were building something permanent. And somehow she had reduced all of it to one simple sentence. "He can give me a better future." I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes without turning on the engine. I kept staring at the steering wheel, replaying every moment. Our first date. Our first apartment, the night I proposed. The way Emily cried when she said yes. Had any of it been real, or had I simply been the only one taking it seriously? My phone started ringing. It was Emily. I didn't answer. Then a message appeared. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at those words for a long time. She was worried about things being difficult for her, not me. Not the man whose heart she had just broken. Her. A second message came. "Ryan is serious about me. I think I deserve a man who can give me security." That was the moment something inside me changed. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt free, because suddenly I understood. Emily hadn't discovered that I wasn't enough. She had simply decided that my value depended on what I could show her. So I drove home. The next morning, I went to our apartment. Emily had already started packing her things. She avoided my eyes. "I'll take the bedroom furniture," she said. I looked around the apartment we had decorated together. "Take whatever you want." She stopped. "You're not going to fight me." I shook my head. "No. Why? Because I don't fight for people who have already chosen someone else." She looked down. For the first time, I saw something that looked like regret, but it disappeared quickly. Her parents called me that afternoon. Her mother told me I should understand Emily's decision. Her father said Ryan was successful and could provide the lifestyle Emily wanted. I listened quietly. Then I said, "I hope he gives her everything she wants." They didn't know what I knew. They didn't know what was sitting inside a locked drawer in my home. A folder containing documents, ownership papers, and years of financial records. Proof of the life I had built while everyone believed I was just an ordinary man. I had hidden it because I wanted Emily to love me without knowing what I owned. Now she had made her choice, and I wasn't going to expose myself to win her back. I packed the last few things that belonged to me. Before leaving, I looked at the empty space where our engagement photo had once stood. I whispered, "You chose the man you thought I was." Then I closed the door. I had lost my fiancée that day, but I was about to discover that losing her was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of hers learning the truth. For the first few days after Emily left, I did something I had never allowed myself to do before. I stopped pretending everything was fine. I stopped answering messages from her family. I stopped checking her social media. And most importantly, I stopped asking myself what I could have done differently. Because the truth was simple. I had given Emily everything I could give her. She just didn't know the value of what she already had. 3 days after the breakup, I drove to my father's old office. It had been closed for years, but I still kept the keys. Inside was a small room filled with documents, old photographs, and memories I had spent years trying to protect. I opened the locked drawer beneath the desk. Inside was the folder I had never shown Emily. My father's company had started as a small logistics business. When he died, everyone assumed it would disappear. Instead, I rebuilt it, quietly. I expanded into technology, transportation, and commercial real estate. Over 5 years, the company grew far beyond anything my father had imagined. Today, it owned several smaller businesses and managed contracts worth millions, and I was the majority owner. Emily had never known, not because I wanted to deceive her, because I wanted to know if she would stay when she believed I had nothing impressive to offer. She had answered that question for me. I looked at the documents and shook my head. Then I noticed something I hadn't expected. Ryan's company name appeared in one of the files. I read the document again. Ryan wasn't the powerful businessman Emily believed him to be. His family had money, but most of his recent success came from contracts and investments connected to my company. In fact, one of his biggest projects was waiting for final approval from my board. I leaned back in the chair. Suddenly, everything made sense. Ryan hadn't simply entered Emily's life. He had been selling her a future that depended on opportunities he didn't completely control. And the man he had unknowingly replaced me with was the very man who could determine whether his biggest opportunity survived. I could have called Emily immediately. I could have exposed Ryan. I could have told her everything. But I didn't. That would have made it look like I was trying to win her back. I wasn't. Instead, I made one decision. I would let the truth arrive naturally. 2 weeks later, I received a message from Emily. "I hope you're doing okay." I stared at it. Then another message appeared. "Ryan says his company is about to close a huge deal. Everything is finally coming together." I almost smiled. She still believed Ryan had won. I typed only one sentence. "I'm glad things are working out for you." Then I put my phone down. The next morning, I walked into my company's headquarters through the main entrance. Employees greeted me as I passed. At the executive meeting, the board members were already waiting. Ryan's contract was sitting on the table. The decision was mine, but I wasn't going to destroy him because of Emily. I simply wanted the truth to speak for itself. And when Emily finally discovered who I really was, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't need to explain why she had lost me. She had already explained it herself. She chose a man because she thought he had more to offer. Soon, she would discover that the life she wanted had been standing beside her all along. 3 weeks after Emily left me, I received an invitation to a business gala. It was being held by one of the largest investment groups in the city. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the guest list. Ryan was there. So was Emily. I decided to attend, not for revenge. At least, that's what I told myself. When I entered the ballroom, I immediately saw them. Emily was wearing a beautiful black dress. Ryan stood beside her, smiling confidently as he introduced her to people. She looked happy. Then the host walked onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight we are honored to welcome the majority owner of Carter Holdings." Ryan's smile disappeared. Emily turned toward the stage, and then I walked onto it. The room went silent. Emily stared at me as if she were seeing a stranger. Ryan's face went completely pale. I shook hands with the host and stood beneath the lights. "Daniel Carter," the host announced, "founder and majority owner of Carter Holdings." Emily couldn't move. Ryan whispered something to her. She didn't answer. Her eyes remained fixed on me. The man she had called ordinary was standing in front of hundreds of people as the owner of the company. Ryan had been desperately trying to impress. After the announcement, people gathered around me. Ryan slowly approached. "Ryan." He swallowed. "You own Carter Holdings." Yes, his confidence disappeared. Then he looked toward Emily. I followed his eyes. She was standing several feet away, tears forming in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. The entire room seemed to disappear. I walked toward her. "Because you never asked." She shook her head. "I thought you were struggling." "I was never struggling. You let me believe you had nothing." "No," I said quietly. "I let you believe I was exactly who I showed you." She covered her mouth. I made a mistake. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said the word she had once said to me. "You chose another man because you thought he could give you a better future." She nodded through her tears. I was wrong. I took a step back. "No, Emily, you weren't wrong about what you wanted." She looked confused. "You were wrong about who I was." Her face broke, and for the first time she finally understood. She hadn't left a poor man for a rich man. She had left the man she loved because she never bothered to discover his worth. I turned away, and this time I didn't look back. Emily found me outside the ballroom. "Daniel, please." I stopped but didn't turn around. She walked closer, her voice shaking. "I didn't know. If I had known who you really were, I would never have left." I finally looked at her. "That is exactly the problem." She stared at me through her tears. "What do you mean?" "You're saying you would have stayed if you knew I had money." She quickly shook her head. "No, that's not what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" She couldn't answer. I took a slow breath. "Emily, I spent 3 years trying to prove that I loved you. I supported your dreams. I stood beside you when things were difficult. I never asked what you could give me." She lowered her eyes. "But the moment another man showed you expensive cars and promised you a better lifestyle, you decided I wasn't enough." "I was confused," she whispered. "You weren't confused." I stepped closer. "You made a choice." She began crying. "I made the wrong choice. Maybe. Can we start over?" For a moment, I remembered the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who once held my hand and promised we'd face everything together. But that woman had chosen another future, and I had finally chosen myself. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said. She looked up hopefully. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to come back." Her face fell. "Daniel." I gave her one last look. "You never asked who I really was." She wiped her tears. "I know now." I nodded. "No, now you know what I own." I turned toward the entrance. The man you should have wanted was standing beside you when he had nothing to prove. Then I walked away. This time, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt free. 6 months later, my life looked completely different, not because I had suddenly become successful. I had been successful for years. The difference was that I finally stopped hiding from the truth. I moved into a new apartment, expanded my company, and started traveling again. I spent more time with the people who had stayed beside me when I had nothing to prove. And for the first time in years, I woke up without wondering whether someone thought I was enough. Emily never came back. She sent a few messages over the following months, but I never responded. Not because I hated her. I didn't. I simply understood that some doors should remain closed, even when the person standing outside finally realizes what they lost. One evening, I sat alone in my office and looked at an old photograph of Emily and me. I smiled. There was no anger left, only gratitude, because her betrayal had taught me something I could never have learned from success. Never measure your worth by the person who fails to recognize it. Emily thought she was choosing another man, but she was actually choosing a life without me. And that was her choice to make. Mine was different. I chose peace. I chose self-respect. I chose a life where I didn't have to convince anyone that I was valuable. Looking back, I realized something else. The greatest revenge wasn't becoming richer than Ryan. It wasn't watching Emily regret her decision. It wasn't standing on that stage while everyone discovered who I really was. The greatest revenge was walking away without needing her to come back. Because sometimes, the person who betrays you doesn't destroy your life. Sometimes, they simply remove themselves from the future you were meant to build. And sometimes, losing them is how you finally find yourself.